Welcome everyone to another episode of the Marketing Measurement Matters podcast. Today with Tim Kreinkamp, because Dr. Tim Wiegels is at a festival, and not a marketing or data festival, but a
hurricane, just a
music festival. So he's just having fun. Amazing. So
good for him.
If he listens, he probably doesn't. Good for him.
Let's face it.
We think about him. How are you?
I'm great. I'm not at the festival, which slightly diminishes my mood today, but only ever so slightly. And I'm really happy to be here with all of you.
How was the event in Munich last week?
Munich was great. So we had an event which was part of our marketing intelligence talk series, which essentially is something that we do together with LinkedIn. And we had quite some very good speakers. We had someone from Rolls-Royce there and someone from LinkedIn themselves. And then me and Mike from Verivox, one of our very esteemed clients. We had a fireside chat on all things marketing measurement, but we also went to a more general buy versus build discussion. We had a chat about AI, what it can do for us. Pretty cool.
Nice.
Very engaged audience also.
Cool.
So great experience overall. Yeah.
Speaking of AI and what AI can do for us, I thought it'd be a great idea to talk about Apple's AI paper, where they basically set up a bunch of experiments, which I think were quite cleverly designed, and to understand how well the LLMs or reasoning models or Gen AI models basically are at really reasoning and thinking. So the paper is called The Illusion of Thinking. And of course, there was some critique on it because Apple hasn't yet really invested heavily into building their own LLMs or generative AI initiatives. And many people just saw it as sort of their response to that, to them not being able or not yet having done it, at least. Able they probably are in terms of investing cash into researchers and stuff like that. But the paper itself caused quite a bit of publicity. And I think it's really interesting, and maybe we can go through it. But first, the illusion of thinking implies that some thought that LLMs can really think and really reason. What's
your... let's take a step back here. So the paper, what it actually does, it kind of differentiates between LLMs, large language models, and LRMs, large reasoning models. And what's a large reasoning model? A large reasoning model is something like, for example, ChatGPT 03, which some of you in the audience might have used before. And we can see that mostly, like anecdotally, at least I feel that normally the answers are better. That thing gives me. But what is more interesting in the context of this paper and generally when we try to compare or examine these things is that when you use O3, you see that it kind of, when you actually spend some time observing what it does and don't go away to make a coffee or whatever, then you see that it actually gives you what is called a reasoning trace. I think it actually tells you like real time how it's thinking and what it's doing. Can be quite interesting. It's like an intern that says like, I'm doing this right now because of that, and probably you'd be like, oh fuck, no, please don't tell me all of this. But
I don't even want to know. I just want to have the results.
Exactly.
Okay,
so you would go away and make a coffee. But I think for the researchers here, and also to just understand the difference, that's probably quite interesting. That these type of models, they have a more complex. I think that's often based on this chain of thought approach. But they have a slightly more complex reasoning essentially going on. So for everyone here, thinking in this case doesn't mean that we have AGI yet. Thinking doesn't mean that the AI is conscious. It's still matrix multiplication.
Okay, we would have to explain what AGI
all of that,
is.
Right? No, it's still matrix multiplication, but it's just,
pattern matching.
Even bigger, even more complex, and kind of essentially a chain of thought which kind of tries to break down the problem or something like that and tries to solve them sequentially.
I mean, the main critique, as far as I understand it, is that, these LLMs, LRMs, whatever, they cannot come up with novel concepts themselves. They're just like learning from what they see and maybe combining it in maybe sometimes accidental ways can, feel like they are really bring up new ideas.
Yeah, but then you could argue concept.
What's the difference to us humans? Like, how does it differ to how we humans think of it? But maybe let's dive into the paper, and then I think some because instead of just criticizing it or talking about it, we could actually just have a look into it and how that looks like. So So the illusion of thinking, yada yada, blah blah blah, and then they explain the different experiments that they.
Yeah, let's first take a look at what actually what they see as a thinking model. So that's something with like ChatGPT or 3, ChatGPT 4 or 3.5. That would not be a reasoning model. So that's what they call an LLM. That's what they call and the other one that's an LRM. And then what they do is they essentially evaluate those on some benchmarks where they kind of classify these benchmarks into low complexity, medium complexity, and high complexity.
Yeah, and I just wanted to bring these up here. These were the 4 different puzzles that they had: Tower of Hanoi, checkers jumping, river crossing. I think that's a missionary and cannibals sort of derivative, and then block worlds. And the thing is that that they chose these puzzles instead of some math or legal or sort of text-based problems because they wanted to make sure that they really are able to sort of prove for reasoning.
Yeah, that's a good point. So they essentially are claiming that while all of these models do really good on coding benchmarks, like some, let's say, probably lead code type problems, that is not a fair assessment because these problems are contaminated or the data that goes.
What does that mean?
I think probably that probably they have just been trained on a lot of these problems already because there's so many out there.
They have
if you were building, for example, ChatGPT or Claude 4, and you wanted to be able to be good at programming, like what would you do?
Yeah.
Give it all these lead code problems, right?
Yeah.
So is it really problem-solving ability that you're testing, or is it just memorizing?
Yes, exactly.
And that's probably a problem that has plagued many university education designers over the years, but still,
Yeah.
So
and that's where they chose these 4 different puzzles because they could control for that, and they could also they claim that they couldn't control for that, but later they also make the point that maybe there were some Tower of Hanoi solutions out in the internet, which some of these models learned without reasoning, really. And one thing that I found interesting that they figured out, it's further up here, that in simpler problems, some of the reasoning models, they identified the correct solution. So they had the correct solution in place, but still continued to explore different alternatives and also incorrect alternatives.
Yeah,
they
but
call it overthinking.
That reminds me of a guy who was in my high school class in the math advanced math course, and he was a very smart guy, but he always ended up getting very bad grades. And he always said that in the exam he was kind of trying to introduce new concepts. And like, bro, that's probably not the best time to introduce new concepts.
Exam time might just not be the right time to introduce new concepts that the professor hasn't seen yet, maybe. But,
So it makes sense. Funny enough, that's probably how we think how humans operate. I think we've been there many times where. I think Tim Wiegels, who has a PhD, he's been ranting about PhD-educated people on this podcast.
He said he's never going to hire a PhD if he ever has to lead a data scientist team again.
Yeah, that's interesting. That the researchers claim that these LRMs overthink because I think with AI we often fall into the trap of trying to attribute some human characteristics.
Yes,
it's not human. It's matrix multiplications after all. Might replicate human biases.
Yeah,
but it doesn't have human characteristics. It's not vengeful. It doesn't have emotions. It's not overthinking.
Also doesn't have senses really. So I mean that's one of the critiques of thinking of LLMs or LRMs ever being able to bring us closer to AGI is that AGI would require a more complex system, different types of AI systems. Another thing I found interesting is that they didn't make use of all the tokens or reasoning tokens that they could have used, so they just stopped at some time. So I just picked some random stuff that I found interesting in this paper to prove that I actually read it. So even though they saw that the complex would have yielded to invest more problem complexity and tokens, they didn't make use of that. So that was quite interesting. And then down here you can really see that. So basically here the different colors are the different sort of complexities. For example, for the Tower of Hanoi problem. And they do still quite a bit okayish for the smaller problem N1, 2, and 3, but with the bigger ones, so where the number of disks, I think that is N here showing the number of disks, if I'm not completely wrong, they basically collapse and don't yield any accurate results anymore. And even though, and then they also make the point of the overthinking again. So I just found it interesting that some researchers look into these matrix multiplication systems to figure out if they are reasoning. That also tells us a bit about us as researchers and humans.
Yeah,
right?
but that I find it actually a good idea. Because you build a super complex thing and then you have some assumptions on how that actually works. But now it's gotten so complex. You've got so many parameters and so many things happening that I think it's actually a very, very good idea to kind of really systematically look at what's happening, what's going on in all these steps.
Yeah.
But then now I would ask you something, János, that, all right, okay, basically that's the gist of the paper, right? The accuracy collapses on very high complexity problems.
Yeah, wait. One last thing.
Okay.
One last before you ask me this question.
Right.
Because then they went even further and provided the exact algorithm on how to solve the Tower of Hanoi problem, which, it's a deterministic problem, blah, blah, blah. You can describe the algorithm. And even then, even when we provide the algorithm and prompt so that the model only needs to execute the prescribed step, performance does not improve and the observed collapse still occurs at roughly the same point.
Yeah, so that
I think that's the most important.
About every step, what he does, in the end, he doesn't do what you tell him to do, all right?
Yeah.
Or what? All right.
Yeah. Oh, well, maybe that's a sign of intelligence.
Perfect. Yeah. That's what we need.
Okay, so anyhow, and then blah, blah, blah. They also make this point here that I mentioned earlier that probably some of the river crossing problems, some of the solutions here might have seen previously in the internet, so there is some contamination happening. So, and then, sorry, you had a question for me.
Yes, I had a question for you, and my question is: how important is this? Because what do we need LRMs or LLMs? What do we need it? What do we need it for? Like, what is a proper way to make use of it? I would argue a proper way to make use of it is not to prove how not smart it is or how dumb it is still, but a proper use of it is just to accelerate productivity and actually make it do the things that it can do already quite well. And that we see happening, that we see with Lovable, that we see with Cursor, amazing applications of AI, probably like a bunch more that don't come to my mind today. For that stuff, they don't need to solve the stupid talk.
Yeah, they don't need to really reason, like to help me writing my LinkedIn post or who would ever do that?
Would you do that?
No.
Oh, interesting. Okay, maybe cut that one
or
out
to help me summarize an email that somebody has written with ChatGPT, or I can use Gemini to summarize it. No, but I mean, obviously, all of cynicism aside, I think there are really valuable use cases.
Even without being able to solve the Tower.
Yeah, for example, writing a research paper, replying to this The Illusion of Thinking paper, which someone did, and he thought it was funny. But
it is funny.
The community didn't take it as a joke at first. So it didn't end with this. And why I think why this is interesting, because it's not that the Sam Altmans of this world go in there and say, LLMs and LRMs are somehow useful and increase productivity a bit for content creation and for coding. They actually have to sell the idea that this will be AGI and that they will be the first there. Otherwise, there is no sufficient reason to have gathered all that money, get all these funds, raise money at crazy valuations. So that's why it's interesting, because then a research paper like that, or this Apple paper, can question whether these evaluations, it's not about LLMs not being useful, it's more about are these valuations of some of these Gen AI businesses are really, and then also maybe NVIDIA, etc. Are we in a bubble or not? I think that's more the question.
But actually these high valuations and all this money getting put into that, that's a massive opportunity for everyone who is not pouring all this money into it to kind of, because recently I was playing around a little bit with the OpenAI API, and I had a look at pricing, obviously, because I'm a responsible person here in this company and actually care about what it costs. And it's really like the requests themselves, they're really not that expensive. And I haven't looked it up, but I'm pretty sure that they're still incurring losses on all these requests. And you can do amazing stuff by pinging the OpenAI API in a smart way with your prompts, with your data, all of that. And you get that subsidized. by someone else's VC. How cool is that?
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, obviously, for them to gather more market share and to get you as a potential customer forever. But then you could also, someone else, I don't remember who asked the reason, if it's really increasing productivity up to that level, these OpenAI, these API requests, wouldn't they have to be much more expensive? Wouldn't you be willing to pay much more money? Right?
Well, I could pay. I'm not sure. I haven't asked finance. Maybe I could pay more. Maybe I couldn't.
Let's not go to that, but yeah. But let's dig into this reply, and I think it's quite interesting in terms of because we should actually be aware of all the things that were happening. So by the way, how did you first find out about this paper? Also on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn.
I was just gonna say all of this stuff now is more or less.
But that's also maybe because we are not on TikTok and we are not on X for obvious reasons. So we are on LinkedIn. Yeah. Like we are now.
So this is the reply, the illusion of thinking, and main author is Siopos Anthropic, and then the co-author is A. Lawson, and it has one point that is I think quite important, that one of the puzzles that the Apple research team examined was actually not solvable. They make this
some
point.
of the instances were not mathematically solvable.
Here the blah, 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 missionary and cannibals approach, test instances, this one was actually not solvable, and then they still accounted for that as not being accurate if the AI didn't solve it. So that was the only, I think, value-creating part of this one here. And then they make some, them I already say, but this Lawson guy. And it explodes, right? Everybody's like, see, and they can actually reason, and people get all passionate about it. And I think that's quite interesting because in the end, and just let's look into this this one here. Oh, this is getting shared now. This is actually then Alex Lawson saying, when your joke paper goes viral, and making the point that all of this was just a joke. He's not even a researcher. He's not a researcher.
What is he doing?
Huh?
What is he actually doing?
I don't know, to be honest. I haven't looked it up.
Right.
I probably should have. But he says how it started, and then he has this really bad feeling about, that actually his paper, which was a joke paper, is now on Arvix, and anyhow.
What is he? I don't know that myself, but I should probably know. But the bar to get onto archive is not super high, right?
Probably not.
Which is good in some instances.
But still, I don't know. Do you have a paper on Arvix? Or?
I don't have one, but I'm also not really a researcher. Maybe I could write one with AI perhaps.
I had a paper. Maybe I should look this up, but not now.
I can call it the illusion of the illusion of the illusion of thinking.
Yeah, do that. Why not?
Or the illusion of working.
Yeah.
No, that would be good.
So, but anyhow, I mean, I found that quite interesting, this back and forth. It shows that how much...
there's a lot of passion.
Passion.
That's great. That's great. Like
people
so
get
many
so opinionated.
People,
they have their dogmatisms in place. And
no, but it's also good. You need to be opinionated. You need to be passionate to kind of
something that the LLMs will never be able to do. Be passionate about it.
Maybe. Oh, I don't know.
Or the LRMs.
In June 1926, we can make an episode of like how LLMs, how large emotional models are performing on different kind of emotional tasks.
If they still allow us to do that,
maybe.
If they haven't taken over the world by then, yeah. So whatever. What are other good use cases of Gen AI and LLM in particular? Because we mustn't forget this podcast is called Marketing Measurement Matters, and we just thought it might be worth to go into the Gen AI news corner there for a bit. But what are more, maybe direct use cases related to measurement?
Yeah. So we have a few things here, but mainly they are clustered around the ability of LLMs to just take into account a lot of information, kind of synthesize that, which sounds like the ability of humans. I mean, at least when you compare us with other animals, we're probably able to to kind of synthesize a little bit more information. But what is kind of difficult for us in measurement, that's kind of the flip side of triangulation. We get hit with a lot of different numbers. Yeah. And we talked about last time that we shouldn't be afraid of having these different numbers and these discrepancies.
Yeah.
But of course, it makes it much harder to overlook things.
Yeah.
And that's where, in my opinion, LLMs can really help us a lot, kind of spot things that we have maybe missed, look for trends, maybe you have things in your UI as a measurement provider that you're not exposing just in order to not overplot, but maybe an LLM in the background, it knows about this. So you can just ask it. Like, let's say, for example, you have a dashboard that's kind of really focused on, let's say, return on ad spend and CPA and attribution and all of that. And then you don't want to kind of overplot with maybe CPM, so they change over time. But you have the data on the backend on the API. So you ask the LLM, like, I had this drop in ROAS. Could it be because my CPM actually increased quite a bit on Facebook? And then could just look it up.
You might not even have to ask that question. Why has it dropped? And then it goes.
Just going to send you all of these things. It's just going to tell you automatically. But I think that's like one big thing. Kind of basically that's at the bottom of it. That's just improving the accessibility of the insights rather than even. Okay, maybe for some people it's going to be new, but maybe the dashboard, most of it is going to give them the most important information. But it's just so much they might overlook it, whatever. So with the LLM, you can kind of improve the accessibility. And then the other thing, I think that relates again to productivity, is that when you have tools that allow you yourself to kind of set up a marketing mix model, then you can kind of supercharge that with AI. That you get AI help by doing the EDA, the exploratory data analysis. It kind of points you to things. You just go in a chat like, hey, tell me, is there multicollinearity? No, there isn't. Okay, go ahead with modeling. Then you get the results. Then you ask it for a diagnosis like, okay, I got this R squared, I got this test error, I got this training error.
So just to be clear, just steps in the whole modeling process that now mostly humans do, right?
Exactly. So you would run a model, you would see, all right, okay, I get these quality metrics, all of that, and then the LLM, you can also hardcode that, but the LLM can help you with a bit of interpretation, can suggest the next steps and all of that, and that's just more again this kind of productivity thing that I was talking about earlier, but also a bit in this accessibility lane.
Yeah, I mean, and then it could also automatically generate dashboards that are more relevant than the standard dashboards. That
Absolutely, it could do that. It could come up with just small.
I mean, coming back to this question, it could just say show you instead of it could give you the answer. Well, CPM increased, but then it could also show you like how CPM developed and year over year.
Exactly.
Could even do some sort of analysis, correlation, whatever, with CPM increase over time and your ROAS for that particular channel. I mean, there are different ways. I mean, because coming back to this initial, how can LLMs reason? Because it sounds, like a very complex task to do these sort of analytical investigations, but in the end, you still follow some rules that you can teach an LLM. I mean, you need some creative.
You follow a recipe, but then kind of what happens if you kind of need to deviate from the recipe, right? And then, like, if you were just following a recipe, you wouldn't even need an LLM. You would just need a flowchart, kind of that you implement.
Flowchart. I mean, you mean like a program that you like some code.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so just hard code, whatever needs to be validated, etc. Cool. And we would have something to show in that regard, but maybe let's leave it for other episodes.
Yeah, let's build some suspense here. Next week we're gonna show some of our Gen AI capabilities.
Yeah, maybe we do that next week. Maybe next week. Maybe we don't.
The week after.
We could maybe show. No,
let's do that.
Yeah. Cool. Any other topics we should cover? I mean, it was quite a bit, but
it was quite a bit. Again, everyone. It's pretty good to question the hype. I think this is what this Little Thinking paper tells us. But it's also good to just also see beyond the criticism and see what the technology can actually do for you. Find some proper use cases, and then if it's the right technology for your use case, fine. And if you don't want to solve towers of one eye problems, maybe you don't need a network that can solve towers of one eye problems. So it's pretty easy, right?
Yeah.
But if you do need that, then obviously go for one that is pretty good at doing that.
Exactly. Yeah. So and then also with regards to these papers, just make sure you understand the hype around, as you just said, and also understand what the motivation was behind them. Because some people posted the response from Anthropic, as if it was like a serious response. And
Exactly.
and then they even let Claude write it and la la la. And I mean, it makes you look really stupid. I've been there. Everybody probably has been there. But also in terms of value creation, I think that should be everyone's job to make sure not just to repost stuff that they find interesting, but rather make sure that it's they really understand.
That's how you get cheap likes. Repost things. I mean, I think LinkedIn is quite good at that. That you don't really get any attention for a repost, so that's probably good.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it's probably good.
Cool. So I hope Tim Wiegels didn't have much more fun in the last 26 minutes than we had, so he misses out on that. No,
he's probably setting up his tent.
Is that the time that you do? Okay,
I'm not sure.
That's what you do at Hurricane at this time.
To a festival in ages. Okay, good. But
cool.
yeah.
Then thanks all for listening in. Again, as always, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, to our Spotify channel, and also feel free to comment.
Like and share.
Like and share, of course. Give us some love there, and then see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.